Welcome, and thanks for tuning in to our first episode of Our Universe, Our Eternal Home. A video series devoted to exploring the idea and belief of reincarnation, shared by many people today, and which is also shared by many ancient peoples of diverse religious and cultural backgrounds. This episode explores the concept of reincarnation and how it relates to the source, destiny, and nature of the human soul, along with describing the relationship of reincarnation to religion. And I'm going to make it clear that it's not necessary to believe in any particular exclusive religious belief, or to be a member of any particular exclusive sect of organized religion to believe in reincarnation. It's a phenomenon that's apart, distinct from any creed or doctrine, that just requires one to decide whether to believe in it or not. So I'll discuss the importance of cultivating a religious life in our quest to develop our humanity to its maximum potential. Perhaps we can agree on the claim that an important and fascinating part of being human is to be able to ponder the question, where are we going after our bodies die? Here I define the word we to mean our spiritual and tangible selves, which I'll refer to as simply our souls. I believe that our souls encapsulate the whole humanity and essence of who we are. Our soul transcends the physical nature of our bodies to express itself as it struggles to achieve its full potential of being all that it can be. A diversity of ideas about the phenomenon of human reincarnation were born during ancient times by the thinking of a variety of people from different religious and cultural groups. I believe that human reincarnation is literally a real phenomenon. It's actually happening all the time, invisibly. We're just unaware of it only because it is a non-physical, intangible process that is beyond sensory detection. Stated in simple terms, I believe that human reincarnation involves the migration of the human soul at death to inhabit a prenatal human embryo within the womb of a mother randomly selected somewhere on planet Earth, probably during the first trimester of pregnancy. Thus, the human soul does live on eternally through an infinite series of consecutive bodies through which the cycle of reincarnation perpetually repeats with each death. My goal in this video series is to develop an illustration of what actually happens in the phenomenon of reincarnation based on intellectual reasoning, personal experiences, observations on human behavior and psychology, and by building upon and refining ancient ideas and suppositions, which are beliefs held without proof or certain knowledge about reincarnation from philosophy, religion, and ancient people in various cultural groups. I believe that human reincarnation is a real phenomenon that actually happens, though unlike the tides, northern lights, and the phenomenon of geological evolution, which are tangible physical events, reincarnation is an intangible process beyond the scope of sensory detection and sensory perception. You do not need to abandon your intellectual faculties of reason and critical thinking to believe in reincarnation. Neither do you need to submit yourself or your intellect to strain yourself to believe that mythological events recorded in a doctrine, creed, or sacred scripture of a particular organized religion are literal historical events, nor do you need to be a member of any particular religious organized group. Further, I want to emphatically state that belief in the reality of an omnipotent, omniscient, supernatural God, the belief in the literal existence of any kind of alien, omnipotent God, is not necessary or required at all. You do not need to exclusively follow or practice any particular kind of organized religion to cultivate a faith in the reality of reincarnation. So then, what exactly does it mean to live a religious life? And how is that distinctly different from just simply believing in reincarnation. So, how does one practice religion without believing in the literal existence of a supernatural, alien, omnipresent, and omnipotent being? Well, I do believe that a religious way of life is ultimately necessary for people to grow in their humanity and to achieve their full potential, to be all that they can be. How this religious life will be expressed will be different for each and every individual person in the world. Every person, I believe, ultimately will face their own religion, even if they're part of an organized religious group, whether it's Christian or Muslim. So, according to author Karen Armstrong, religion is about transcending one's emotions and normal mood experiences to experience flashes of insight and profound truths about humanity in achieving psychological transformation. Our species, Homo sapiens, is the only species on Earth which is a religious species that practices religion and is splendidly classified as Homo religiosus by author Karen Armstrong. The name Homo religiosus characterizes our species very accurately because we have always known that to experience a profound psychological transformation and insights into the hidden dimensions of human nature, such as wisdom, love, beauty, and virtues, we need to practice religion. Religion enables us to transcend our emotions, our senses, and the restrictions of our ego, which may include ingrained prejudices, cynicism, jaded despair, and tendencies to subjectively categorize people in a dehumanizing way. Transcendence will lead us to connecting with the source of love or the ground of being. Karen Armstrong asserts that the religions practiced by ancient people was neither an emotional experience nor was it about obtaining information. Instead, religion led people to step beyond their emotional mood complex and egotistical prejudices and limitations to experience a profound psychological transformation and growth in their humanity. Speaking from my own religious experiences, I also believe that the practice of religion is not an emotional experience. But when I have entered a state of being using religion in which my normal emotional moods are transcended, I have experienced profound feelings of awe, wonder, and fascination over the mysteries of the universe that I can only describe as being deeply joyful at their root. Perhaps feelings of awe, wonder, fascination, and joy flow as a result of the religious experience itself. Ultimately, however, I cannot explain the ineffable or indescribable nature of the religious experience because it is beyond the scope of the senses. In fact, I think morality flows from religion, but is not the heart of the religious experience itself. So, ancient people called Sufis, who practiced the mystical spirituality of Islam, believed that the process of emptying themselves of their emotions to step outside of their mood complex and achieve a state of ecstasy was crucial to entering into religious experience. This process of emotional self-emptying is called kenosis, a Greek word, and the word ecstasy is derived from the Greek word ekstasis, which means a going out of the self. Ultimately, belief in reincarnation is not a necessary part of the religious life. In fact, many deeply religious people have been and continue to be quite content to live in a state of unknowing, in which they are oblivious of what happens in the afterlife. Religion is about becoming more human, not about believing the literal reality of a particular phenomenon, such as reincarnation, or any particular moral code. According to Karen Armstrong, people deeply devoted to cultivating a religious life strive to live intensely in each present moment and to experience the depth and richness of their humanity with joy. Such deeply religious people have learned to refrain from worrying about what the future holds, let alone their fate after death. I believe that the spiritual and tangible phenomenon of reincarnation can be compared to love, beauty, virtues, and emotions, because they are all realities or phenomena which are also spiritual in nature and imperceptible to the human senses, and thus can neither be measured nor analyzed using the scientific method. The word reincarnation derives from the Latin phrase of entering the flesh again. The equivalent term, metempsychosis, attributed to Pythagoras of Samos, is derived from the Greek words meta, meaning change, and empsychon, to put a soul into. An alternative term for reincarnation is transmigration, which means the migration of the soul from one life, body, to another at the point of physical death. In ancient religions, reincarnation expresses the belief that the intangible part of a human being, called the soul, is reborn in an interconnected cycle of existence through transmigration of the soul from a deceased body to a newborn human being. The ultimately indescribable and unexplainable concept of rebirth, which is a belief of Indian religions, has been discussed and documented using various terms of symbolic language. For example, punarjanman is a Sanskrit word meaning rebirth, transmigration. Many alternate terms for reincarnation are documented in ancient Sanskrit texts of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, which are religions that include the belief that reincarnation is cyclic and endless. So, indeed, the phenomenon of reincarnation is expressed by the Sanskrit word samsara, which means wandering or world, and has the connotations of cyclic or circuitous change. And further, samsara is the idea of rebirth and the cyclicality of all life, matter, and existence. According to the ancient religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, people continue to pass through successive cycles of reincarnation unless they gain spiritual insights which lead to their liberation from the cycle of birth, life, death, reincarnation, or rebirth. Indian religions consider reincarnation as a step that leads to aimless drifting, wandering, or mundane existence. However, reincarnation is also viewed as an opportunity to achieve a spiritual liberation through ethical living and practicing a variety of meditative, yogic, or other spiritual exercises. Ultimately, from the perspective of ancient people practicing Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, the spiritual goal of humanity is to seek a release from the cycle of reincarnation, of successive reincarnations, and thus achieve a state of liberation expressed by the terms moksha, nirvana, mukti, and kaivalya. The concept of reincarnation has its origins in the Upanishads, which are ancient Sanskrit texts of spiritual teaching and ideas of Hinduism of the late Vedic period, so around 1500 to 500 BCE, which is a period in the history of the northern Indian subcontinent. In contrast, my spiritual goal for humanity would be the opposite of that pursued by ancient people practicing Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. For I believe that the human soul can only find the opportunity for self-expression and to be all that it can be through a physical human body in the concrete, natural universe. Our home, which right now is on planet Earth. As intergalactic space travel and traveling light speed is not really possible as we're confined to planet Earth. So, in a vague, misty, hazy miasma within a purely intangible spiritual plane of existence, no unique selves or souls could ever be defined or achieve their potential for full self-expression, as no physical bodies would be available to facilitate self-expression. Thus, rather than seeking liberation from eternal cycles of reincarnation, my goal for humanity would be to stay firmly within a never-ending cycle of reincarnation in the physical natural realm. Death is not the end, it's just a new beginning. Like the end of a story is a new place to start. Pythagoras, a famous late 6th century Greek philosopher, taught the Greek concept of transmigration of the soul, called metempsychosis, which I mentioned previously, which described the spiritual phenomenon of each individual and unique human soul leaving the body at the point of physical death and migrating to inhabit a new human body, which would be its next incarnation. Thus the soul, with all its humanity of a person, becomes reincarnated. The Haida First Nations people, who have been living both on Haida Gwaii, an archipelago off the west coast of British Columbia, Canada, and on the islands of the Alaska Panhandle, believe in the phenomenon of rebirth. So the Haida people also believe in reincarnation, specifically that a person could be reborn several times to become reincarnated in other human bodies. For example, a transfer of identity was often made to a newborn relative so that a young man could claim that his grandfather's soul lives within his body so that he is in effect his own grandfather. In terms of the process of rebirth and reincarnation, the Haida think that the act of soul transfer of the grandfather's distinct soul would have taken place when the young man was born. Similarly, a Haida woman could state with conviction that she is the reincarnation of her grandfather's sister who died in childhood. These claims would cultivate a pride in the family heritage of an individual. Shamans, who are men or women recognized as possessing powers beyond those of ordinary mortals. And they served as intermediaries for spiritual, supernatural beings who could temporarily lose their own identities in the process. The shaman, a formidable and prominent figure in ancient Haida societies, played both the roles of a doctor and clairvoyant. A clairvoyant is someone who can perceive things beyond the range of ordinary sensory perception and is endowed with special skills and creativity and was consulted on all vital matters of life and death. So, for example, a shaman's special, insightful powers enabled him to interpret through dreams or visions the specific child into which the spirit of a dead person would return. The shaman would be able to determine, actually, the specific child into which the spirit of a dead person would return. This means that the Haida believed in the phenomenon of transmigration of a human soul at death to inhabit the body of a child, perhaps a newborn. Further, a shaman could use an instrument called a soul catcher to capture the departing spirit of an ill patient and then proceed to restore it to full vitality. An example of Haida miniature art is a brush from a massive village depicting a human figure extending an enormous tongue reaching down to his or her feet. Such a hyperextended tongue is a trait which the Haida associate with bears. The position of the figure's hands are also bear-like. A carved thunderbird head lies below the bear-like human. This beautiful miniature art expresses the spiritual connection between humans and animals by suggesting the common source of life and being sustain both the bear and human spirits. This common source of life and being sustains both the bear and human spirits. Bears are considered to be like people in Northwest Coast Aboriginal legend. It can transform into human form at will. If the spirit of a bear, like that of a human being, is generated and sustained by an immanent and eternal source of being, immanent meaning near, and very much present with us, near us, and enveloping us. This source of being is beyond time itself, and which flows through all life forms in nature and the universe. Well, if the spirit of a bear and the human being are generated and sustained by such a source of being, then surely the eternal souls of both animals and humans are clearly destined to remain forever on Earth or somewhere in the universe. Indeed, animal and human spirits will eternally transcend the infinite diversity of finite physical bodies, which are cyclically animated over a lifetime and then die. Assuredly, I believe that we may draw contentment and peace from being consciously aware of where we are going after death, especially when confronted with the stark reality of our imminent death and feeling anguish, anxiety, and horror over the agonizing fact that there will come a day when our bodies will die and our particular bodies, identities, temporal personalities, and collected memories of experiences and relationships will cease to exist forever. However, we can rest assured that our souls with their eternal personalities will live on, though we will forget the memories collected in the brains of our deceased bodies. We will start the exciting adventure of accumulating new memories during our next childhoods. I believe that with each new human body, starting in infancy, the eternal personality of the soul becomes expressed in a unique way. When human beings mature into adulthood and the adolescent fantasies of being immortal and invincible fade away, they become aware of their finitude, and that they will cease to exist within a time span of 50 to 75 years. So being aware of that brief time span, relatively evolutionary scale, 50 to 75 years, can be defined as a finitude, mortal finitude. So when human beings are aware of their mortal finitude, this awareness can fill the human ego, our conscious self, with a deep sense of dread, and manifests itself as chronic anxiety and worry over the fact that one day our body will die. This agony born from the human awakening to our own mortality and to the reality that our lifespan in this universe is limited is called the shock of non-being by theologian Paul Tillich. Psychologist Sigmund Freud called this churning, deep, emotional dread the trauma of self-consciousness. Not only is our death relatively imminent within the span of evolutionary time, but also our lives are in varying degrees at risk of mortal peril from powerful forces of nature. The physical toll of old age and pathological diseases, all of which further exacerbate the painful shock of non-being. As an antidote to the engulfing despair flooding from this tragic situation of humanity, I want to once again emphatically declare that the wonderful piece of knowledge that may help us, each of us, to live in peace, harmony, and even joy with the terrifying and dread-inducing awareness of the shock of non-being. Death is not the end of us. Our immortal and inviolate souls, that inviolate means free or safe from injury or violation, our inviolate souls will live on eternally through an infinite series of unique physical bodies in a never-ending cycle of reincarnations in our universe, our eternal home. According to German philosopher Martin Heidegger, being is a fundamental energy that supports and animates everything that exists. It is transcendent. It cannot be seen, touched, heard, smelled, or tasted. We cannot perceive being with our physical senses, but can only perceive being. We can only experience being. We cannot perceive being. We can only experience it acting in people or non-human organisms, objects, and the natural forces surrounding us. Author Karen Armstrong writes that it is impossible to define, describe, or classify being because it is an all-encompassing And the human mind can only define restricted, finite beings. Paul Tillich preferred to think of God as the ground of being, which I believe is the term that best describes the truly ineffable reality of God, of the ultimate reality or source of love and life. I prefer to think of the ultimate reality as the ground of being. So ineffable means too extreme to be described using language, which is how we can describe the ground of being or ultimate reality as source of love and life. The ground of being cannot be defined or described using language. It is ineffable. And human language is inadequate to the task of defining that which is beyond normal sensate experience, that which cannot ever be seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched, nor can it be analyzed by the scientific method. This is why the natural phenomenon of reincarnation is imperceptible to the human senses and undetectable to scientific investigation. I believe that reincarnation is coordinated by a non-theistic, undefinable, indescribable ultimate reality that I will refer to as the ground of being. The ground of being envelops, infuses, and pervades all nature, life, organic and inorganic matter, and all space throughout the universe, all inorganic matter too. It is not a supreme alien, omnipresent, or omnipotent supernatural deity. The ground of being cannot be related to like another person or a finite being. It cannot be related to another person or finite being because it encompasses all beings, matter, and space in the universe. So it just cannot be related to by us. We can't personally relate to it at all. Hindu religion includes the belief that the human soul or spiritual self exists, called the atman. Further, the human soul is described as being the unchanging, eternal essence of a living being, which journeys through the universe through a series of reincarnation until it achieves sufficient self-knowledge. Indeed, the knowledge of humanity is infinitely profound and mysterious. It is unfathomable, and its depths can never be completely plumbed, as anyone who has experienced the plays of William Shakespeare can attest. Karen Armstrong defines the Atman as the sacred power of Brahman, which each individual experiences within him or herself. Brahman is the Hindu term for a sacred power that sustains all existing finite things and beings and is the inner meaning of existence. I would interpret the Atman to be a person's true self or soul, which receives its spiritual energy and essence from Brahman, which is being itself or the ultimate reality that encompasses, generates, and sustains all human life as well as all other beings, living and non-living. Aristotle believed that the soul is actually the cause or source of the living body in three senses. First, the soul is the source or origin of movement. Second, it is the end. And third, it is the essence of the whole living body. As opposed to non-living things like rocks, the purpose of being of living creatures is to live. So that the souls of all living creatures are the cause and source of the life force within living creatures. So we cannot live without our souls. Our body cannot be animated without our souls and cannot grow without our souls. In addition, the soul is also the final cause of the body. So Aristotle thought that nature always acts for the sake of something. That is, nature acts to fulfill a specific purpose or towards some end. In the case of animals, it is the soul which acts to fulfill the purposes, producing the organs and tissues of the natural body. The soul directs and powers this process, forming organized tissues, organized body from chaos. From this reasoning, I can make the claim that the soul is absolutely necessary for the creation of organs, tissues, and limbs in a developing human embryo, thus, I think that when a soul migrates from a deceased human body to a prenatal embryonic one, it must enter the embryo and foster the growth and development of the human tissues, organs, and limbs at the earliest stage possible, which is probably just past that of the fertilized egg or zygote stage, just after conception. So just after the zygote stage, a zygote, by the way, is a fertilized egg which contains 2 sets of chromosomes, one from the mother, one from the father, and that forms just after fertilization of the egg within the uterus. So just after the zygote forms within the female uterus, a transmigrating human soul from somewhere in the world randomly enters the human embryo and directs the development of the complete human body. And as the soul is always alive, eternally alive, it must just go from one body to another. As bodies decay and die, but the soul doesn't. It's inviolate, indestructible. The precise unique characteristics of the new body, such as hair and eye color, body type, gender, facial proportions, and attributes as well as limb length, are determined by the DNA of the egg and sperm, but the actual progress of the physical development of the body is generated and orchestrated by the soul itself. I believe that based on intellectual reasoning and rational psychological inquiry, which can be done even though we can't really use science, we still use our minds. Actually, the human soul can only achieve full expression of its potential within a human body. Thus, at the point of physical death, the human soul only ever transmigrates to randomly inhabit the body of a human embryo in utero. Furthermore, reason dictates that the human soul never transmigrates to occupy the body of a non-human animal, plant, bacteria, fungi, or protist, or algae, because it would not be able to achieve self-expression through a non-human organism. The human soul can never achieve its full potential and be all it can be within an animal body. So we're not going to come back as mosquitoes, as hippopotamuses, slugs, lichen, or slime molds on a log, or a beetle under a bark. We're going to come back as people. It's the good news. I do believe that animals and non-human organisms, such as bears, wolves, caribou, capybaras, jaguars, dogs, cats, hamsters, llamas, hippopotamuses, insects, plants, fish, and fungi, have souls too. But they are fundamentally different from human souls because all non-human organisms, like gorillas, orcas, and dolphins, whales, lack both self-consciousness and the intellectual capacity to reflect on history and plan for as well as anticipate the future. That's how animals are different from people. Even though they may learn and communicate at a sophisticated level, non-human organisms have a vastly lower intelligence and do not express the artistic and religious dimensions of humanity, nor do they possess the great human intellectual capacity for imagination and for using language. Non-human organisms only live in the present moment and are not aware of their limited lifespan, nor of their often imminent mortality. They cannot predict their imminent death. Clearly, the human soul can only achieve its fullest expression through a human body with its highly advanced brain, intellectual faculties of imagination, and powers of reasoning. I do not believe that I'm a specially gifted holy person, by the way, who has any mystical faculties or divinely inspired exclusive knowledge about the fate of the human soul after death. I don't believe that. I'm just an ordinary person, ordinary guy, and nor do I believe that I have any supernatural gifts or powers of clairvoyance to communicate with the spiritual realm. In short, I do not have any special mental abilities beyond what other human beings possess. Nor do I have any supernatural abilities either. I am simply a human being just like you who happens to be filled with a great passionate desire to know and understand where I am going when I die. It is a wonderful, awe-inspiring, and fascinating experience for me to think about the fate of my soul after my body dies. Let's go over a few concepts now about the intangible, inviolate, and infinitely mysterious and profound human soul. How it is rooted in nature and nourished, sustained, and generated by the ground of being, the ultimate reality. Well, the spirit is defined as the animating or vital principle in man and animals and is that which gives life to the physical organism. In contrast to its purely material elements, the breath, it's referred to as the breath of life. It's incorporeal or immaterial, being as opposed to body or matter, being or intelligence. It's conceived as distinct form, or it's conceived as being distinct from or independent of anything physical or material. The soul is a spiritual part of man regarded as surviving after death. I have to say here, to be gender inclusive and politically correct, I have to say it's the spiritual part of people regarded as surviving after death and as susceptible of happiness or misery in a future state. So that would include emotions. So emotions are a part of the soul, not just part of the physical body, not part of the physical body. They might be felt physically, but emotions are part of the soul. So the soul is also defined as being the disembodied spirit of a deceased person, regarded as a separate entity and as invested with some amount of form and personality. I will speculate here that each one of the billions of currently existing individual human souls, we're approaching 7.8 billion, has its own eternally fixed, unique personality, which is expressed to varying degrees during each lifetime, but I think there's a personality that's eternally fixed, giving its uniqueness. So I think that someone's temporal personality, expressed over one particular lifetime, it could be one of thousands. So the temporal personality expressed during one lifetime is affected and molded by many conditions such as family, school and community environments, and the emotional complexes which develop through the course of relationships to family, peers, and other members of the community. These factors all influence the degree to which someone's intrinsic, eternally fixed personality within their soul is expressed over a lifetime. Thus, the temporal human personality that is actually expressed in a lifetime is ultimately finite and terminates at the point of physical death, along with all accumulated memories of life experiences and relationships stored in the brain. Well, what's the ego? Ego is part of the soul. It's that which is symbolized by the pronoun I, the conscious thinking subject or self-consciousness. The id is the part of the mind in which in which instinctive impulses and primary processes are manifest. All kinds of subconscious desires are churning and flowing. The id, which I believe is part of the soul, is the disorganized part of the personality structure. In fact, is the only component of the personality present from birth. It's the source of a person's bodily needs, wants, desires, impulses, basic impulses, instincts. According to Freud, the id is unconscious by definition. It is the dark and inaccessible part of our personality. The intellect, which I believe is also part of our soul, and it is operates through our physical brain. Our intellect includes the faculties of the mind or soul, by which one knows and reasons. It includes the power of thought and understanding, and excludes feeling and will. The human intellect can only function and achieve its full potential for expression through the human brain. Therefore, if the intellect is part of the human soul, it can never operate through an animal, a non-human animal. So, and it is beyond feeling. It's beyond emotion. It's just involving thought and understanding. So that's the intellect. Imagination is a quality that's uniquely human. It's the intellectual action of forming new ideas, images, or concepts. External objects which are not perceived by the senses. So we imagine things that are not actually there. They're imagined. And animals don't really do that. I don't think. Well, certainly not to the extent that humans do. So, an imagination is the real basis of human creativity, creating great art, literature, sculpture, and writing. So will, and also great science too. I think great scientists have great imagination. So the will is that part of the soul which the will is part of the soul. It's that which one desires. Wish, longing, inclination, intention, or determination that something shall be done by another or others. That's the will. So it's longing, inclination, intention, desire, something that shall happen or take place, desiring, expressing voluntary action or conscious intention directed towards the doing of what is expressed by the principal verb. So it's voluntary action, conscious intention directed towards doing something. That's we use our will to accomplish those actions. So whether it's non-physical or physical. So our free will is the power of acting without the constraint or necessity of fate, is the ability to act at one's own discretion. Our emotion is psychologically defined as a mental feeling or affection, such as pleasure, pain, desire, aversion, surprise, hope, fear, as distinguished from cognitive or volitional states of consciousness. That's the emotion. So I believe the following 5 elements of human nature: the ego, the id, the will, the intellect, which contains the source of the faculty of imagination, and emotions, all together compose a human soul which will live forever, eternally, through inhabiting an endless succession of distinctly unique human bodies, each randomly selected by the phenomenon of human reincarnation. Our souls can be thought of as our true selves, who we actually are. For the sake of simplicity, I shall refer to the ego, id, intellect, will, emotional, self complex as simply the soul, which encapsulates all of these 5 elements. However, it is important to keep in mind that each human soul is infinitely mysterious and unfathomable in its profound nature. I was trying to say unfathomable. So that it is endlessly greater than the sum of the 5 parts that I just defined, because the soul is ultimately indefinable, indescribable. So I can try to use language to express it, but in the end, language is inadequate. So the soul has indescribably infinite depths which can never be explained by language. And, for example, I believe that each human soul contains a unique, eternal personality that is expressed in a different way and to a different extent during each lifetime. Through reasoning, though, I have been able to develop the supposition. A supposition is a belief held without certain scientific proof or knowledge. Important to know. And I've developed the supposition that each and every human soul shares in the same essence or substance which is called ousia. It's a Greek word. So ousia is the same essence or substance which composes something. I therefore claim that every human soul shares the composition of the id, ego, intellect, will, emotional, self complex. So again, ousia is a Greek term meaning the essence or nature of something, the essence of what something is, and that which makes a thing what it is. When applied to a person, ousia could be the substance composing the human soul. When applied to God or the ground of being, it means a divine essence that is beyond human understanding. So, I believe that every human soul shares in that ousia, in that same essence or substance. Simultaneously everywhere throughout the infinite universe, pervading all space and matter, enveloping all life forms perpetually. The ground of being is fundamentally composed of an inexplicable ousia, which is different from that of the human soul and beyond our comprehension. Unlike the human soul, the ground of being transcends time and the laws of physics and chemistry. It is beyond time and has always existed, though no one knows how the ground of being exists, because it is not a being at all. Contrary to the all-encompassing and omnipresent ground of being, the existence of the human soul is restricted to the finite scope of the discrete human body it inhabits. Through a living human body, the soul may achieve self-expression as the ego perceives the world through the perspective of the sensory organs. I believe that not only does each unique individual human soul share the same ousia, or basic essence, with all other human souls who have ever existed and who will exist, but also that the ousia composing each and every human soul is fundamentally rooted in or connected to the ground of being. In fact, the human soul, though composed of a different ousia or essence than that of the ground of being, and in fact, the human soul, though composed of a different ousia, is nevertheless rooted in the ground of being. So the human soul does not perish, but lives eternally. It is because our human souls are perpetually nourished and sustained by the ground of being that our souls will continue to live forever. Because the ground of being has existed eternally from the infinite past and will continue to exist into the infinite future, and is in fact beyond time itself. All human souls are thus inviolate and immortal in nature because they are rooted in the source of love and life called the ground of being. Naturally, it follows that each and every soul can tap into an infinitely deep well of wisdom, love, virtues, beauty, the virtues including kindness, compassion, empathy, patience, understanding, forbearance, courage, and perseverance. Using symbolic language, I like to think about each unique individual human soul as being a glowing fragment of the rainbow, mosaic of humanity, connected to and nurtured by the ground of being, just like a prenatal human embryo is connected to his or her mother through the placenta and umbilical cord. Nature, which is continually regenerated and sustained by the all-encompassing ground of being, can be partitioned into two domains: the concrete, physical, tangible domain, and the abstract, non-physical, intangible domain. First, the tangible physical domain, measurable by science, includes rocks, biological cells and tissues, proteins, fats, and DNA, or organic matter, as well as inorganic matter, including minerals. Finally, the tangible realm of nature includes all atoms and molecules in the solid, liquid, and gaseous phases, and metals. You get the picture? So the second domain of nature, which is imperceptible to the human senses, is the intangible domain, composed of the abstract elements of reality, such as the spiritual elements of human nature, human souls, personality, self-consciousness, imagination, ego, id, emotions, intellect, virtues, wisdom, love, beauty, attitude, will, and desires. All these spiritual elements of the human nature. In addition, the intangible realm of nature includes non-human souls and spiritual animating principles, which direct instincts and govern life processes in non-human life forms. Both domains of nature, the tangible and intangible realms, are enveloped, infused, permeated, sustained, and generated by the ground of being, which is, I believe, the core of nature itself. I'd rather think of it as the source of nature, life, than being something supernatural, because it is here, it is present with us, it is present everywhere in the tangible universe. So I believe that each uniquely distinct human soul among the billions of human souls on Earth is not only a part of the intangible realm of nature, but also rooted in the ground of being, which has the power to generate and sustain both the physical and intangible realms of nature. I believe that somehow, in a way that will always elude human understanding, both the physical and intangible realms of nature have always existed and transcend time itself. Just like the ground of being has always existed, though no one can say how the ground of being actually exists, because such a concept is beyond the limits of human comprehension. The ground of being does not exist in a way that we can really understand at all, and it does not exist like any other object in the universe. So thus, there was no creation ex nihilo. There's no creation from nothing, or instantaneous creation of the universe out of nothing, after aeons of time during which nothing existed, because then the intangible spiritual realm of nature would be subject to the physical law of time, which is impossible, because the spiritual or intangible realm of nature, which has always been emanating from the ground of being, is beyond time itself. The ground of being, which I believe has always perfused and enveloped both the physical and intangible realms of nature in the universe, is itself not subject to any physical laws, including time, as it is not a being and does not exist as any temporal, finite, physical entity. Thus, if the universe spontaneously formed from a Big Bang event, then there must have been some form of pre-existing matter from which the universe was spawned. The law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but only converted from one form to another. Another law of chemistry, the law of conservation of matter, states that in all chemical reactions, excepting radioactive decay, atoms are neither created nor destroyed. Only old bonds are broken and new bonds are formed. Indeed, all atoms present among the reacting atoms or molecules must be accounted for among the product atoms or molecules in any chemical reaction. Thus, according to the universal physical law of the conservation of matter and energy, neither the energy nor any of the uncountable atoms in the universe can be created or destroyed. human souls are certainly more precious and valuable than atoms and energy, and are immune to the physical processes of decay and decomposition. Therefore, human souls also must never become destroyed and are classified as being inviolate. Although science can not ever study the intangible phenomenon of human reincarnation because this process cannot be detected by the human senses, we can still accept the validity of the claim that reincarnation is a reality because the intangible phenomena of love, emotions, beauty, virtues, and wisdom, all undetectable by science, are still all realities. They're nevertheless realities. In fact, the intellectual origins of language, a phenomenon that is unique to our human species, and the effects of which are perceived by our senses, is ultimately within the intangible realm of nature that is beyond the scope of science, like reincarnation, especially since languages existed long before they were written down and phonetically decoded into recorded grammatical patterns that we can see and hear. Languages without writing systems have originated and developed from the human intellect, deep within the abstract, intangible realm of nature, developed through reason, and they are just as real as English, which is recorded. The following scientific evidence strongly supports the claim that every human soul is composed of the same elements and is made of the same stuff, or Visa. Biochemical research has demonstrated that our bodies are almost completely genetically identical, with no significant genetic differences existing between different races or ethnic groups. Science has actually proved that human beings all have the same bodies, which are made of the same kind of physical stuff. Now that's overwhelming proof of the inherent equality of everyone, of the almost 7.8 billion people around the globe today, regardless of variation in facial features or skin color. Indeed, genetic research on human DNA has revealed that all the different races of human species are more than 99% genetically identical to each other. Furthermore, there are frequently fewer genetic differences between members of different racial groups, who may differ a lot in skin color or facial features, than between two members of the same racial group. So that's amazing. So there are frequently fewer genetic differences between members of different racial groups than between two members of the same racial group. Clearly decisive results produced from the Human Genome Project have shown that there is less than 1% of genetic difference among humans. In fact, many scientists had already concluded that most biological variation among humans occurs independently of superficial racial characteristics. Specifically, racial traits such as eye folds and skin color are simply like any other trait inherited by descendants and constitute only a few of the many genetic traits that randomly emerged within the specific human populations at different times and in different geographic regions. These findings tell us that all human beings, regardless of racial background, actually share exactly the same kind of body made from the same physical stuff, with no significant physical differences existing between people of different ethnic groups or racial heritage. What a joy it is to see science prove what many of us have believed through faith in our common humanity, that we are all physically composed of the same types of tissues, including the same brain, heart, bones, and skin. This physical reality reflects the spiritual reality that each human soul is composed of exactly the same spiritual essence, or Visa. How strongly this evidence illuminates the intrinsic spiritual equality of every human being, of every skin color possible. For if human beings are all physiologically identical with negligible variation, then we must all be spiritually identical, with each and every soul composed of the same spiritual stuff, or Visa. Such reasoning leads to the conclusion that all human souls are generated and are nurtured and are sustained by the same one source, namely the ground of being. By being rooted in or connected to the ground of being, all souls thus have the property of being inviolate, indestructible, and immortal. Each human soul will thus be preserved for all eternity. A most joyful and inspiring revelation indeed. Of course, though every soul is composed of the same stuff, each individual soul is uniquely distinct in being composed of a unique self and personality. Knowing that we will all remain on earth during our next lives, beginning as human embryos in utero, all adults, especially those over 40 or 50, can look forward to becoming children again with all the stamina, vigor, strength, energy, optimism, and adventurous spirit that childhood brings. Armed with this knowledge, we may find it easier to stop worrying about our imminent death, because it is not the end. And we can thus live contentedly, courageously, and even joyfully with the shock of non-being, and start living with each precious moment of life given to us as intensely as possible, as deeply religious people have always lived, to grow in our humanity, to reach our fullest potential, with the courage to be all that we can be. True, it is sad to reflect that upon death, the memories of human relationships and life experiences cultivated over a lifetime, which influenced our temporal personality, will be terminated forever. But we can draw inspiration from the good news that the ultimately unknowable, unique personality of each human soul will live forever. In addition, those people who accept the supposition that human reincarnation is a reality would probably become motivated to do their part to altruistically create a more humane, beautiful, and just world. First, the rights of people belonging to visible ethnic minorities and Aboriginal peoples will be equal to those of non-Aboriginal peoples and people belonging to visible majorities. Second, women will share equal rights and opportunities with men. And third, people living in poverty and in developing countries will all be able to have access to good housing, healthcare, good quality housing, education, food, clean air, water, and safe levels of sanitation in the environment, and to be able to live in a non-polluted environment. Instead of seeking to exploit the environment for short-term profit, people will instead become more interested in preserving the wilderness and abandoned tracts of farmland to create more natural public parks for everyone to enjoy, and to preserve more farmland so that more people can buy local fruits, vegetables, and grains. Indeed, people who know that they are here to stay on planet Earth during their next lives, people who know that they're going to stay on planet Earth during their next lives, will tend to sustainably use natural resources and minimize environmental degradation, deforestation, and pollution. Such endeavors would tend to be pursued by people who believe in reincarnation, because they know that not only is it a just cause to leave a more humane and naturally beautiful planet for their generation's children, but also because they are aware that they will in fact be one of those children. Truly, our dear planet Earth will be for everyone, for every human soul, past, present, and future, to live and love and enjoy. My name is Adam. Thank you for listening. If you're interested, I invite you to tune into other episodes of this series. I invite you to subscribe to my channel. I will display the topic of each episode for your convenience. Please leave a comment. Once again, consider subscribing if you really want to support my channel, if you like my channel. Goodbye.